Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of The Golden Bolt. As always, my name's Kevin. Now, let me first open by saying sorry if I sound a little nasally or a little congested or anything. I'm just getting over a sinus infection that knocked me on my butt the past 3 or 4 days. So hopefully I sound okay in this video. I feel pretty good, so I figured the show must go on. So last time you guys saw me, I asked you to vote for which game you wanted to see next, Ratchet and Clank or Shenmue's Deep Sea Adventures. Thankfully, you guys all voted for Ratchet and Clank at the time of this recording, so thank you. I am not ready for Shenmue just yet. I will tackle him, don't worry, I'm going to get there. I have one more game after this review that I want to do, and then we're gonna suffer together. So let's get right into it. Believe it or not, Ratchet and Clank was Insomniac's third attempt to break into the PlayStation 2 market. After Spyro 3, they began designing a game called Monster Knight. It was essentially, I'm not kidding here, an action puzzle game where you used other creatures as weapons and armor. Those creatures would then level up and get new abilities as you used them more. It was literally Zelda and Pokemon mixed together. Now this game never got past the initial concept phase though, because another game stole their focus. This one, codenamed I-5, is better known as Girl with a Stick. The team spent several months polishing this concept, a cross between Zelda and Tomb Raider, focusing on, well, you guessed it, a girl with a stick. Sony was very positive about this project at first, but soon it became clear that it simply wouldn't work. It was very basic in the concept, and apparently it simply wasn't very fun. In fact, only company creator Ted Price was actually interested in the project by this point. Sony came to him one day and expressed full confidence in Girl with a Stick, but respectfully suggested that maybe it might be a better idea to go somewhere else. This promise of support no matter what, this sort of I'm not mad, just disappointed to Insomniac, really woke Price up, and within a few weeks, I-5 was cancelled and Ratchet and Clank began development. Even though they were now behind the curve with the PS2 already out for a while, they pushed through and released Ratchet and Clank in November of 2002. If it sounds like I'm skipping over some details, it's because, well, I am. In the description, I'm going to link to an IGN article that discusses this whole time period in detail with Insomniac employees. It discusses the friendly relationship with Naughty Dog, how the two share technology during the PS2 era, Girl with a Stick in detail, and so on. They can and did do a much better job than I could explaining this, so I'm gonna leave it to them. Definitely do check it out if you get the time though. It's a really good article if you're interested in developer history and the like. Since the new Ratchet and Clank movie is being based on this game's plot, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning right now. Ratchet and Clank begins with Ratchet, a furry, cat-like creature known as a Wombax, working on his jury-rigged spaceship on his homeworld of Veldin. At the same time, we see a small robot being created in a factory on planet Quartu. However, this robot is a defect, coming out much smaller and looking much different than any other robot at the factory. Here, the robot finds an infobot playing a horrifying video clip and decides he needs to make a run for it. He escapes the planet but is chased into space and shot near Veldin, where he crashes right near Ratchet's home. Ratchet rescues the unconscious robot, who later awakens and explains that he needs to find Captain Quark to help try and save the galaxy. He shows Ratchet the infobot he found earlier, where this mogul named Chairman Drek is explaining his new plan to destroy another planet. He wants to take out an entire chunk of this planet to make his own hybrid planet for his species to live on.
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my... We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
Ratchet agrees to go along in his ship, if only because he wants to leave the planet and this little robot is the key he needs to get the ship off the ground. In space, the two exchange names.
You got a name?
My serial number is V54296.
Oops. I'll just call you Clank for short.
From here, the first third of the game focuses on finding Captain Quark. The duo meets a load of interesting characters, from pro hoverboarder Skid McMarks, to the nerdy robot expert Al from Al's RoboShack, to Quark's personal fitness trainer Helga. Oh, what the hell? What is that? Who designs a robot to be fat?
You will drill for the rest of the day!
Why is she German? Germany isn't even in this galaxy. What? And of course I couldn't do this review without mentioning the plumber.
Geronimo!
Did he just slide down a sewer pipe?
That is all. Eventually, the two track down Quark, and he tells him to meet him on his personal training planet, Umbris. If they can pass his test, he'll help save the galaxy from Executive Chairman Drek. Now, I repeat, the spoilers begin here. Click here to skip to the end of this section. On Umbris, Quark reveals that he's working for Chairman Drek. Well, I mean, technically we already knew that because they show him with Drek a couple times, but still. He ambushes them and forces them to fight the monstrous Blargian Snagglebeast. After taking down the beast, Ratchet magically becomes an ass.
I wonder what that infobot is for.
Maybe it can replace you.
This is probably where the biggest problem of the game begins. Ratchet's character is just really hard to like in this game. Yeah, Clank may be naive, but Ratchet just hammers in how much he suddenly hates Clank, and he tries to make his focus entirely on getting revenge on Quark. For most of the rest of the game, the two have split priorities, and they effectively bicker like an old couple for a good chunk of it.
That's what I said.
No, that is what I said.
Fine.
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 Occasionally, Ratchet will realize that Clank is right, but then he goes right back to being himself. It's wildly inconsistent for a good while. Hell, the only reason Ratchet stays with Clank in the immediate aftermath of this fight is because the nearest ship needs a robot to pilot it. Some of the stuff he says to Clank just makes him seem like a pretty weak hero, honestly. Anyway, the two continue to work together through the game's second act, if begrudgingly, while they try to catch up to Quark and Supreme Executive Chairman Drek while foiling the latter's plans. They explore several more planets, from Gaspar, a lava planet where Drek builds his warships, to Orxon, the homeworld of Drek's Blarg species, to the tropical resort planet of Pokataru, where the Blarg are dumping toxic waste. Eventually they make it to an orbiting base where they finally get to Quark. They beat him in a dogfight and he's sent crashing down to the planet below. With him out of the way, Ratchet finally puts his focus on Drek, and Drek puts his focus on Velden. All that time, while Ratchet and Clank were playing catch-up to Quark, Ultimate Supreme Executive Chairman Drek was creating a giant space laser called the Deplanetizer to destroy whatever planet he felt had the perfect orbit. That way his new hybrid planet would have prime real estate for him to sell. After all the trouble the two cause him, Drek makes it personal, and goes to destroy Ratchet's homeworld just to make a statement. After the two finally catch up to him on Velden, Drek explains that he was the one that polluted Orxon beyond habitability in order to justify making a new planet. He sold the land on the new planet at exorbitantly high prices, and once they move to the new planet, he'll pollute it again and repeat the process. Ratchet and Clank then fight him and stop his giant mech in their showdown on the Deplanetizer, and he ends up getting knocked through space onto the nearby hybrid planet. Around the same time, the Deplanetizer accidentally switches focus right towards that planet. Ratchet and Clank hit the switch, blowing up Drek and the planet he built in one fell swoop. They clearly didn't think that one fully through though, because then planet chunks come flying onto Velden, and Clank saves them from nearly falling to their deaths while avoiding the wreckage at the cost of a badly broken arm. Ratchet, because he's a jerk, just says, "Oh, you'll be fine," and walks away. Come on, man, you can't just do that, he saved your life. Clank starts to walk away sadly, but then Ratchet has a change of heart and comes back. And that's it. The credits start to roll and we get a clip of Captain Quark advertising the personal hygienator on TV under the persona of Steve McQuark. Oh, by the way, Quark survived that crash. Overall, it's a solid enough plot with one big problem. Ratchet oozes early 2000s edge, which can really get on my nerves very often, but almost every other character is great. They all have charisma, the dialogue is funny, and the experience is enjoyable in spite of Ratchet. Drek's a great villain, and the story really knows how to hype him up. Plus, the bit with his name getting longer and longer and longer is just great. Ratchet being a jerk just for the sake of being a jerk really brings down the experience though, and for that alone, I have to give the story of the game a silver bolt. Ratchet and Clank is a hybrid action platformer game with a heavy focus on weapons and gadgets. Throughout the game, Ratchet will collect 15 weapons and about a dozen different gadgets that add to his abilities. The weapons range from incredibly useful to not so useful. Each weapon has a lot of charm, and every new ability continues to add to the sense of progression the player gets. Learning which weapon works best in any given situation and changing your strategy up is insanely fun. Fighting a tank? Use the Devastator. Fighting smaller enemies? Use your wrench. Or use the suck cannon to suck them up and then shoot them out at bigger enemies. Want to turn everybody into giant chickens? Go for it! The weapons always have a good amount of ammo too, and there's always a vendor placed right near the perfect point, so you never really feel cheated when you run out. Even Clank gets upgrades too, from a helipack to give him the ability to help Ratchet glide slowly over large gaps, a thruster pack to open special switches, and even a hydro pack to help him swift against tough currents. With a whopping 18 levels, there's always something new to learn as the game goes on, and that really helps strengthen the experience. The levels are incredibly varied, and a lot of the time, the planets will feature entirely new enemies with different strategies that you have to change up to take down. It's wonderful, it really, really is. Moreover, the planets often have branching paths. Some sections often require a power-up you don't have yet, or they can be tackled in any order, leading to a Metroid style of progression at times. So while there are only 18 different locales, you may explore these levels in several ways as time goes on. Speaking of which, Clank isn't just a glorified backpack either. He has his own sections where he commands these little things called Gadgetbots to attack enemies and solve puzzles. These sections, I don't mind them at first whenever I'm playing, but after a while it gets physically tiring to play as Clank. He moves so slowly, and if one of these robots dies while in combat, it respawns back at its initial spawn point, meaning you could have to run all the way back just to grab it. These sections are never difficult either, they're just tedious. They only really serve to break the pace of the game most of the time. Otherwise though, the pacing is incredibly solid. There's only one real point where the action significantly dips, and it involves Clank, spoilers, but otherwise Insomniac does a fantastic job of breaking up combat and platforming. If a level has two paths, they're almost always split between combat focused and platforming focus. I don't mind either of those because both concepts are executed so well. Ratchet feels wonderful to control, and I almost never feel outgunned because the game's so well designed that you almost always have just enough money for the next weapon. This game is a constant positive feedback loop that gradually increases in difficulty until it spikes near the end. That spike is almost entirely due to these guys. These guys are a pain to deal with, in part due to the one major fault of the gameplay. See, this game is more platformer than shooter. Insomniac didn't implement a strafing or a lock-on system until its sequel, so every weapon auto-aims, with no easy way to change who a gun is aiming at. That's not a problem for most of the game since the enemies aren't a huge threat. Hell, for most of the game you could probably just run past everything. Your 4 nanotech hit points would probably suffice because enemies aren't that tough really until the end. These guys, though, fire incredibly accurate shots and come in groups of at least 2. They also show the flaws of the weapon design. They tend to be just out of range for almost every weapon you have, but they have literally unlimited range themselves. Seriously, look at this! I can't even see that guy. He's literally a football field away and he can still send those shots all the way directly to me. There's really only one weapon that can combat these guys at that range, and it's this one, the Visibomb gun. It's a rocket launcher that shoots a guided missile that you aim in real time. You can't run past these guys easily either, because by the time they show up, they're starting to pad the game with fodder enemies too, normally just to distract your gun's lock-on just to be annoying. This reaches its absolute worst on Calibo 3, where it's just a slog of encounter after encounter right from the very second you start the level. That's why I just skipped the level now. Yeah, I actually discovered this trick myself. It lets you skip the entire level in all of its painful glory. I've scoured the internet and not once have I ever seen it used or mentioned, so I'm gonna take credit for it. I even checked on the Insomniac forum, and nobody had a clue this was possible. Now, besides the auto-aim issue, there are some other quirks too, like Ratchet's wrench throw taking incredibly long and leaving him a sitting duck, or having to stand literally next to bolts to pick them up, or how the game isn't exactly fond of spreading the checkpoints around. I think my biggest of these small issues is the quick select menu. In this game, your quick select menu only carries 8 items at once, and with nearly 20 different items that you use consistently, it's very seldom quick for me. I don't even set my quick select in this game anymore because it's actually faster just to pause the game and manually choose which item I want. The big issue this brings up is that it makes many weapons feel less viable because you can't just switch them on the fly. When you have that extra second or two to pause the game and think about which weapon you want, you choose whichever is definitely best. Weapons like the Pyrocitor or the Mind Glove tend to get used very little as time goes on because of this. Again though, these are mostly just growing pains, and they all get fixed pretty quickly as the series goes on. And like I said, the auto-aim isn't even a problem until near the very end. Even if we had just a sniper type weapon, that alone would probably have fixed the problem with these enemies. As it stands though, it's a pain because only 3 weapons can fight them at a reasonable range. These enemies present pretty much the only time in the game where I feel the game is at fault for my death, not me. With only 4 and a maximum upgraded 8 nanotech, enemies like this just cheapen the experience just enough to get on my nerves. Now, on to collectibles. In the game, there are 40 gold bolts hidden throughout the levels. You'll need to use all your weapons and gadgets in unique ways to get many of these gold bolts. Or not. Overall, these add an even better sense of exploration and accomplishment on top of the branching paths. Plus, these gold bolts can be used either here or on Planet Novalis using this teleporter in New Game Plus to buy gold upgrades for your other weapons. These upgrades tend to increase the damage and color of the projectiles, and they're a nice bonus for playing the game a second time through. Speaking of which, you'll need to play the game a lot if you want the final weapon, the Rhino.
What's a rhino anyway?
Rip ya a new one.
What did you just say to me?
This thing costs 150,000 bolts, which takes at least 2 or 3 playthroughs to accrue naturally, but god is it worth it. Each shot fires 8 auto-homing missiles that destroy anything in your way, and it's got 50 shots. Just think about that for a sec. Also, it beats every boss in seconds. Like I said though, prepare to play this game several times to get it. Anyway, besides the gold bolts, there are also these optional skill points that return from Spyro. You can achieve these by doing specific tasks, such as defeating this boss using only your wrench, or standing exactly here. You're not told how to do these though, so you may just get some by accident through curiosity. These are also a nice touch. They're effectively proto-achievements half a decade before achievements became popular. On top of all of these are some optional gadgets, like the Persuader, which lowers the amount you have to pay to Gadgetron vendors. This game is so packed full of content that at times it's hard to believe this was their plan C. I haven't even touched on the wonderful hoverboard races, for example. It's fun in a completely different way than its sequels, and maybe that's what's most impressive, that this game holds up even though the series changes completely right after this. Like I said, it's not without some problems, but if you take advantage of the arsenal you have, those problems can easily fade away. For that reason, I'm going to give the gameplay of Ratchet and Clank 1 a golden bolt. Boy, is this game a beauty. The colors are all really vibrant, the worlds are incredibly varied, and the characters look really great too. You can literally feel the experience from the team at Insomniac just by looking at this game. Every character from ally to enemy, be it in the animation or the mannerisms or just the overall design, feels right. These doofy looking bots on Eudora, they act doofy looking. The animation of these alien snappers, with their really fast leg movements, is both silly and a bit off-putting. It's fitting for the character. Drek's Blarg troops act menacing while still having soul to them. I can go on and on with these examples because literally every character in this game is charming in my opinion. It's a textbook example of great character design. Moreover, of the nearly 20 levels in this game, there are maybe 2 instances where 2 worlds feel visually similar. Yeah, we've got your ice levels, your lava levels, and so on, but they all separate themselves from these tropes using their design. Yeah, Eudora and Novalis may look alike because they're both temperate, foresty, green-looking worlds, but there's a very clear difference being made with the logging machines in the backgrounds and the ships flying overhead that Eudora is being mined for its trees. You don't even need to listen to the story to understand this. That's good design right there. The only 3 levels that I would say might be a tad too similar are the 3 space station levels. And there's really only so much you can do with space stations in one game, so that's an understandable place to slip up. But even these levels are made distinct by their soundtracks. And oh boy, the soundtrack. The techno score made by David Bergot is so insanely catchy. Off the top of my head, I can't think of many themes that aren't memorable from this game. What's even better is that they're not just good level themes, they're good themes in general. They all accentuate the levels they're built for, helping merge the aesthetic with the soundtrack and making this, well, a cohesive experience. From the active, almost jazzy execution of Velden's theme, playing up Ratchet's first jump into adventure, to the light but bustling metropolis that gives a subdued sort of twist on the big city trope. Bergot rarely tries to go beyond this lively techno-esque sound, but when he does, the soundtrack does falter a bit. This sort of goes into something I'm going to discuss in a moment, but near the end of the second act of the game, a lot of the themes blend together to me, because they tend to repeat this ominous feel. Don't get me wrong, it's great at first, and these themes still do have distinct feeling when you listen into them, but in the moment it comes off as a little bit half-hearted. Outside of this though, the presentation is incredibly solid. Again, you wouldn't even know that this is their 3rd attempt on PS2 by looking at it. Even the HUD and the menus are well designed too, and they have good thought put into them. Nothing ever feels out of place on your screen at any given point. There's even a help desk feature that gives inexperienced players advice as they progress through the game, but it's entirely optional, so you can skip them or turn them off at will. I know, that might sound small, but think about how many games force their tutorials upon you. Or at the very least, they don't give you an option if you want to shut up the in-game help. This is one of those little things where you won't notice if it's done right, and Ratchet and Clank is full of that. It's a game designed equally for any kind of player, and there simply aren't many games that truly do that. Now, I do have to note that there are some presentation issues brought forth by the PS3 port of the game. For one, the frame rate lagged significantly for me in this playthrough, although it almost never did in my previous playthroughs. It's also got some weird clipping issues sometimes, some cutscenes randomly desync the audio, and so on. The PS3 version of the game is inarguably inferior to the PS2 one, but it still looks great, and playing the game in native 1080p is usually the deciding factor for me with this game. The quality of the other 3 PS3 ports of the PS2 games is much worse though, so if you're gonna play only one of the PS2 games through the HD collection, make it this one. Otherwise, just try and grab a PS2. With all that said, I'm giving Ratchet and Clank a golden bolt for its presentation. I'm actually going to skip the cohesion category for this video, because I feel the writing's really on the wall for how well this game comes together. I don't really want to summarize what I've already gone into detail with earlier and be redundant, but know that the game's cohesion would be gold if I had chosen to do so. Ratchet and Clank is a game defined by major hiccups: Ratchet's character and the option. The latter rarely mounts as a significant problem, and in spite of the former, everything about the game comes together perfectly. It does give Ratchet and Clank both satisfying character arcs, sets them up as heroes, and leaves paths open for sequels. Add all that to how enjoyable the game is and how great it looks and sounds, and you get a wonderful experience. Yeah, Ratchet's a jerk in this game, but that might make it even better in the next game when he becomes a lot better of a character. For now though, let's point. I do want to touch on replayability. The whole Ratchet series has been defined, and the first game is definitely not as immediately replayable because of though. Clank loses his gliding ability when you restart the game, and Ratchet loses all of his secondary gadgets, which makes it a first go to restart. But the addition of the for the Rhino offset that fairly well. You try and fully 100% in one go, that was insane cost, but it's a game full of depth for however many playthroughs you want to give it, be it a normal run, a challenge run like maybe a wrench-only run or something, or even speed runs. Anyway, let's wrap this up.